This story is not based on rumor or speculation. The ship you are about to hear about existed, sailed, and sank, and its cargo was officially documented by banks, insurers, and the United States government. The SS Central America was an American steamship that sank in 1857 while carrying a massive shipment of gold from California to the East Coast. This gold was not private treasure. It was commercial gold, mined, purchased, insured, and transported as part of the American economy during the gold rush. According to shipping records, insurance documents, and contemporary newspapers, the ship was carrying hundreds of passengers and a cargo of gold valued at millions of dollars by modern standards. The ship never arrived. Caught in a powerful hurricane off the coast of the Carolinas, the SS Central America took on water, lost power, and eventually sank into the Atlantic Ocean. More than 400 people died. Most of the gold went down with the ship. This loss was not symbolic. According to economic historians, the sinking of the SS Central America directly contributed to the Panic of 1857, one of the most severe financial crises in American history. Before we continue, let me say this briefly. If you're interested in real, documented stories about lost gold and forgotten decisions, consider subscribing to the channel. This project is still growing, and reaching the first 1,000 subscribers is an important milestone for me. Your support truly helps. If this story interests you, a like and a comment also make a real difference. Now, let's go back to the beginning, because to understand why so much gold was on one ship, we need to understand what California gold meant to America in 1857. By 1857, gold was no longer just a symbol of opportunity in America. It was infrastructure. California gold fueled banks, stabilized credit, and backed paper currency across the country. Every shipment moving east carried more than metal. It carried confidence in the financial system. According to historical records, most California gold reached the East Coast by a long, fragile route. Gold traveled by ship from San Francisco to Central America, crossed land by rail and mule, and then continued by steamship through the Atlantic. It was slow. It was risky, but it was essential. Banks on the East Coast depended on regular deliveries. Insurance companies tracked shipments carefully. Delays alone could unsettle markets. In 1857, demand for gold was unusually high. Economic pressure was already building. Speculation was widespread. Credit was tight. According to contemporary financial reports, even small disruptions could have serious consequences. The gold aboard the SS Central America represented weeks of accumulated production. It included commercial shipments from banks' private deposits, newly minted coins, raw gold intended for refining. This gold was not concentrated because of recklessness. It was concentrated because efficiency mattered more than caution. Steamships had become symbols of reliability. They ran on schedules. They crossed oceans faster than sail-powered vessels ever could. Confidence in technology had replaced older fears of the sea. According to shipping practices of the time, loading a large quantity of gold onto a single, powerful steamship was considered reasonable, normal, safe. The Central America was modern. It was well built, and it had completed similar voyages before. What no one could account for was how quickly confidence could collapse when weather, technology, and economics failed at the same time. Because when the ship left port, it was not carrying a gamble. It was carrying routine, and routine is often what history breaks most quietly. The SS Central America left port as it had many times before. There was no sense of urgency. Text, no warnings strong enough to delay departure. According to contemporary weather knowledge, storms were expected, but not accurately predicted. Hurricanes in the Atlantic were poorly understood in the mid-19th century. Sailors relied on experience and observation, not forecasting. Within days, conditions began to change. Winds strengthened. Seas grew heavier. Rain became constant. At first, the ship continued forward. Steam power offered confidence that sail alone never could. The Central America pushed through weather that would have slowed older vessels. According to survivor accounts, the ship maintained course longer than expected. Then mechanical problems appeared. The ship's boilers began to struggle. Water entered areas never meant to flood. Text pumps worked continuously, but they could not keep up. According to eyewitness reports, passengers and crew quickly realized this was no ordinary storm. The ship was losing power, and without power, it could not face the sea head-on. Turning back was no longer an option. The Central America was caught between weather and momentum. Waves struck the hull repeatedly. With every hour, the ship sat lower in the water. Gold did not cause the storm, but it did not help the ship survive it. The weight of the cargo reduced buoyancy. It increased strain on a vessel already fighting the ocean. By the time distress signals were raised, the situation was irreversible. Nearby ships received the calls. Some altered course, but distance, weather, and time worked against rescue. Text, according to later investigations, the Central America remained afloat longer than expected, not because it was safe, but because it was well built. That endurance would save some lives. It would not save the ship. As the storm intensified, the SS Central America entered its final phase. According to survivor testimonies and later investigations, the crew worked continuously to keep the ship afloat. Pumps ran without pores. Boilers were pushed beyond safe limits. Every effort was focused on buying time. Time was all they had left. Passengers were brought on deck as conditions below worsened. Water spread through the ship in ways that could not be sealed or controlled. The list of the vessel increased. Movement became difficult. Rescue attempts began to take shape. Text, several nearby ships responded to distress signals. One of them managed to reach the Central America and began taking passengers aboard under extremely dangerous conditions. Transfers were slow and exhausting, carried out amid heavy seas. According to eyewitness accounts, priority was given to women and children. Many men remained behind, helping others reach safety. The gold never moved. There was no attempt to lighten the ship by discarding cargo. The weight of the gold was known, but removing it would have required time, coordination, and equipment that no longer existed. More importantly, no one believed the ship would actually sink, not until it was too late. This belief mattered. Text, until the very end, there was confidence that the Central America would survive long enough for full rescue. Steamships were not supposed to vanish. They were the future. As the final hours passed, that confidence collapsed. The ship lost all remaining power. Waves broke over the decks. Structures began to fail. When the SS Central America finally went under, it did so suddenly. The gold, sealed, documented, insured, disappeared beneath the Atlantic along with the ship. Rescue efforts saved some lives. Hundreds more were lost. and with them, one of the largest single shipments of gold in American history. The sinking of the SS Central America was felt almost immediately, not just by families who lost loved ones, but by the American financial system itself. Text according to economic records and contemporary newspapers, the gold aboard the ship was already accounted for. Banks were expecting it. Insurance policies referenced it. Credit was built around its arrival. When the ship failed to arrive, the absence was not abstract. It was measurable. Banks on the East Coast suddenly faced shortages of hard currency. Gold reserves that were meant to stabilize loans and back paper money never appeared. Confidence weakened quickly. Within weeks, financial stress spread. According to historical analysis, the loss of the Central America's gold was one of the direct triggers of the Panic of 1857. Credit tightened, banks failed, businesses collapsed. Unemployment rose. The gold did not cause the panic alone, but it accelerated it. Text: this is what made the loss unique. Most shipwreck treasures disappear quietly, affecting only those who own them. The gold on the Central America was part of a larger system. When it sank, it created a visible gap in the flow of money. Insurance companies paid claims, but not without strain. Some failed under the pressure. Others reduced coverage, making future shipments even more risky. The disappearance of the gold forced a recalibration. Routes were reconsidered. Shipping practices were questioned. Confidence in technology weakened. Gold that had been treated as routine suddenly revealed how fragile the system around it truly was. Text: and somewhere, far below the surface of the Atlantic, the missing gold rested untouched, no longer stabilizing markets, no longer circulating, no longer belonging to anyone in a practical sense. It had exited the economy completely. For decades after the SS Central America sank, the gold it carried was considered permanently lost. Not because no one wanted to recover it, but because no one knew how. According to historical and technical assessments from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the ship had sunk in deep Atlantic waters, far beyond the reach of any existing salvage technology of the time. Divers could not reach that depth. Equipment could not withstand the pressure. Precise navigation was still limited. Even locating the wreck was a challenge. Text: the final position of the Central America was estimated using incomplete observations made during a violent storm. There were no coordinates in the modern sense, only rough calculations and survivor recollections. Over time, uncertainty expanded. Currents shift wreckage. Sediment covers structures. Metal corrodes. Wood collapses. According to maritime historians, by the early 1900s, the SS Central America had effectively disappeared into the ocean floor. Not erased, but unreachable. The gold itself made recovery harder. Gold is dense and heavy. When a ship breaks apart at depth, heavy objects fall quickly and embed themselves into the seabed. They do not remain neatly contained. Text: even if the wreck were found, retrieving the gold would require precise positioning, remote equipment, controlled lifting systems. None of this existed for nearly a century. As a result, the gold became something different, not lost property, not abandoned cargo. It became technically inaccessible. For generations, the SS Central America was referenced in history books as a closed case, a tragedy, a loss, and a reminder of how final the ocean could be. That assumption would eventually be challenged, but only when technology caught up with ambition. For nearly a century, the SS Central America remained beyond reach. Then, quietly, the situation changed. By the late 20th century, advances in deep-sea technology began to challenge assumptions that had stood for generations. Text remote-operated vehicles, improved sonar mapping, and deep ocean recovery systems made it possible to see and eventually touch places that had once been unreachable. According to documented accounts, serious efforts to locate the SS Central America resumed when technology finally matched the depth at which the ship was believed to rest. This was not a treasure hunt in the romantic sense. It was a technical operation. Researchers relied on historical weather data, survivor testimonies, shipping records, and oceanographic models to narrow down the probable wreck area. Even then, the search zone remained vast. Progress was slow. The ocean floor offered no clear landmarks. Debris was scattered. Visibility was limited. Text, but eventually, fragments consistent with a 19th century steamship began to appear. According to later reports, confirmation came not from a single dramatic discovery, but from a pattern, artifacts, structural elements, and cargo items that aligned precisely with what was known about the Central America. The ship had been found. What followed was not immediate recovery. It was careful documentation. Before any gold was lifted, the wreck site was studied. Its condition was recorded. The distribution of debris was mapped. This mattered not just for recovery, but for verification. The gold was no longer a rumor at the bottom of the sea. It was real, visible, and still where it had fallen. Text for the first time since 1857. The loss of the SS Central America shifted from impossible to conditional. Recovery was now a question of method, legality, and restraint, not possibility. When recovery operations finally began, expectations were cautious. According to expedition reports and legal documentation, the goal was never to retrieve everything. That would have been unrealistic. The wreck site was extensive, fragile, and partially buried under sediment accumulated over more than a century. Instead, recovery focused on what could be reached safely and documented properly. Gold was found, not as a single cache, but as scattered reality. Text bars, coins, and raw gold appeared exactly where physics said they would be: heavy objects resting deep in the debris field, pressed into the seabed by time and pressure. According to official inventories, a significant amount of gold was successfully recovered. Some of it was remarkably well preserved. Coins retained sharp details. Bars showed minimal corrosion. The ocean had been harsh to the ship, but gentle to the metal. This alone was historic. For the first time since 1857, gold from the SS Central America re-entered the world above the surface. But the recovery was incomplete. Large portions of the wreck remained untouched. Some gold was inaccessible without disturbing the site beyond acceptable limits. Other areas were simply too deep, too unstable, or too costly to reach. Text according to experts involved, a substantial amount of gold is still believed to remain at the site. This created a strange outcome. The treasure was no longer entirely lost, but it was no longer fully recoverable either. Part of it returned to circulation. Part of it stayed behind. The SS Central America became one of the rare cases where history was partially reversed and partially left unresolved. The ocean gave some of it back. It kept the rest. Recovering the gold did not end the story of the SS Central America. It complicated it. According to court records and legal analysis, The moment gold was lifted from the seabed, an old question resurfaced in a modern world. Who owned it? The ship had sunk in 1857. The gold had been insured. Claims had been paid. Companies had dissolved. Text ownership chains had fractured. More than a century later, multiple parties came forward. Insurance companies argued that they had assumed ownership when they paid out claims. Salvage teams asserted rights based on recovery and risk. Government entities examined jurisdiction and maritime law. The courts were forced to reconcile 19th century commerce with 20th century technology. According to judicial decisions, this was not treated as simple treasure recovery. It was treated as a complex case of abandoned property, salvage rights, and historical contracts. Some gold was awarded to salvors. Some was claimed by insurers. Some became entangled in prolonged litigation. What mattered was precedent. Text: the SS Central America became a landmark case in maritime law, influencing how future deep-sea recoveries would be handled. Gold that had once stabilized an economy now reshaped legal frameworks. It was no longer just metal. It was evidence. And even in recovery, it continued to create friction, not because of greed, but because of unresolved history. Even after successful recovery missions, the story of the SS Central America did not reach closure. According to expedition data, legal records, and expert assessments, the wreck site was never fully exhausted. Not all areas were explored, not all debris fields were cleared, and not all gold was reachable with acceptable risk. This was a deliberate choice. Modern salvage operations are constrained by more than technology. Text: they are limited by law, by cost, and by responsibility. Disturbing a historic wreck too aggressively can destroy evidence, context, and meaning. As a result, large sections of the site remain untouched. Some gold is believed to be buried deeper beneath sediment. Some may lie beyond mapped areas. Some may be embedded in collapsed sections of the hull. According to specialists, this remaining gold is not lost in the traditional sense. Its location is approximately known. Its existence is not disputed. What limits access is practicality. At extreme depths, recovery becomes exponentially more expensive. Each additional operation risks damaging what remains, and each legal dispute adds layers of uncertainty. So the gold stays where it is, not forgotten, not unreachable. Text: but no longer pursued with urgency. The ocean has not reclaimed it through erosion or decay. It has simply held onto it. The SS Central America carried gold meant to keep a nation's economy moving. When it sank, that gold did more than disappear. It changed history. Banks collapsed. Markets panicked. Confidence evaporated. More than a century later, some of that gold returned to the surface. It was catalogued, sold, and placed into collections. It became an object again, but not all of it came back. Some remains where it fell in 1857, beyond reach, not because it is hidden, but because reaching it no longer makes sense. This is what makes the story of the SS Central America different from most treasure stories. It is not about mystery. It is about consequence. Text: gold that once moved markets now rests in silence, no longer part of any system. Its value did not vanish, only its role did. If you enjoy calm, documented stories about real treasures and the decisions that shaped them, consider subscribing to the channel. This project is still growing, and reaching the first 1,000 subscribers is an important milestone for me. Your support truly matters. And before you go, consider this question: when something valuable is recovered too late to matter, has history been corrected or simply revisited?